This is Richard RJ Eskow for the 0 Hour, resuming our series of readings with RJ or readings with Richard on mostly classic works of either history or social science that I think would be of special interest to our listenership, books that you may not have read or books that you've read but it's been a while and a refresher might be in order. And the book I'm going to be reading from today is by C. Wright Mills, the great American sociologist. The book is White Collar, The American Middle Classes. Now, White Collar, when it came out, was a groundbreaking book in the 1950s because it described a relatively new phenomenon, which is the American middle class and the white-collar worker, whereas in decades prior, we had had blue-collar or industrial workers, the proletariat, and we had a small group of managerial elites. We didn't have a burgeoning middle class as came to be after the Second World War, and in fact came to cease to be in certain ways after the upper classes, the wealthiest, started once again siphoning up the vast majority of wealth gains, productivity gains in this country, starting in roughly 1980, the beginning of the Reagan era, although that's not completely precise. So it describes a phenomenon that was relatively new at the time that C. Wright Mills wrote this. And of course, C. Wright Mills had no idea that 30 years later, the American prosperity boom and the growing middle class would start to become a thing of the past. But the passage that I wanted to read was not actually about the middle class per se, but about the role of American political intellectuals in American political life as this middle class developed. There had been a vibrant history of political intellectualism in American history, and great thinkers like John Dewey had proposed innovative ideas, offered new ways of looking at the world. And by the 1950s, that was slowly starting to become stifled, not nearly to the extent that it's stifled today, but it's striking how, and I'll just double check the date here, but it's striking how C. Wright Mills' words from 1951, some of them still echo today. And I'm thinking of these words about public intellectuals, and again, from White Collar by C. Wright Mills in the chapter called Brains Incorporated. Good title. Okay, he says, and I quote, "The shaping of the society he," gendered language of the time, he meaning the public intellectual, "lives in, and the manner in which he lives in it are increasingly political. That shaping has come to include the realms of intellect and personal morality, which are now also subject to organization. Because of the expanded reach of politics, it is his own personal style of life and reflection he is thinking about when he thinks about politics." Now, I'll just take a break and invite you to think about people like editorial writers for the big newspapers and some of our other political commentators who really make the political about themselves. Now, and I'll ask you to think about alternative media and the progressive left as I read this next paragraph. "The independent artist and intellectual are among the few remaining personalities presumably equipped to resist and to fight the stereotyping and consequent death of genuinely lively things. Fresh perception now involves the capacity to unmask and smash the stereotypes of vision and intellect with which modern communication swamp us. The worlds of mass art and mass thought are increasingly geared to the demands of power." I think anyone who watches television now might know that. "That is why it is, in politics, that some intellectuals feel the need for solidarity and for a fulcrum. If the thinker does not relate himself to the value of truth in political struggle, he cannot responsibly cope with the whole of lived experience as the channels of communication communication become more and more monopolized, and party machines and economic pressures based on vested shams continue to monopolize the chance of effective political organization, the opportunities to act and communicate politically are minimized. That is why we do what we do here at the Zero Hour. That is why I work personally so hard to build ties of solidarity with other writers and thinkers and activists who are trying to help us break out of what William Blake called the mind-forged manacles, the way we look at the world, the stale way in which we look at the world. I don't want to become overblown or grandiose about it, but I think there are a lot of good people trying to do the same thing. And while I'm discouraged by the state of mass media, corporate media, I am encouraged by the proliferation of new thinkers and new thoughts, and I hope you are too.